Okay, so this is a tour through the brain for the A&P1 class here at SUNY Canton. Here we have the surface of the brain, and we can see the right and left cerebral hemispheres separated by the longitudinal fissure running up the middle. On the surface we can see the lobes, the frontal lobe at the front, the occipital lobe at the back, the parietal lobe high and on the side, and the temporal lobe low and on the side. Now if we look at, there are some then hills and valleys. The first valley we have is the central sulcus that runs across here, separating the frontal and parietal lobes. The hill just in front of the central sulcus is the precentral gyrus, and the hill just behind the central sulcus is the postcentral gyrus. We can also see the lateral sulcus on the side, separating out the temporal lobe. We'll now go inside the brain to see some features on the inside that we can see. First of all, we can see the parieto-occipital sulcus, which is only visible on the median aspect of the brain. Going forward in the brain, we can see the corpus callosum, this heavy white band we see running across. Under the corpus callosum is this teardrop-shaped septum pellucidum. We can then see a pink band, which is the choroid plexus. In the very center down here, we see a brown dot. The structure surrounding the brown dot is the thalamus. And below the brown dot, sitting in the little white W, we can see the hypothalamus. If we go to the back of this structure, the little white tib we can see sticking back here is our pineal gland. If we keep working our way down, we can now see a little white, I call it a bum, because it has two cheeks on it, which is the corpora quadrigemina. The top cheek is the superior colliculi, and the bottom cheek is the inferior colliculi. As we keep working our way down here, we can now see the pons, the egg-shaped structure, and the medulla oblongata, the swelling that we can see below the pons. There's also the cerebellum visible at the back. Now, working our way back up into the brain, there are some spaces enclosed by various structures. The thalamus, located around the brown dot, encloses the third ventricle. This third ventricle comes back to drain, if you will, into the cerebral aqueduct, this thin column, which on this particular brain has a number 72 pointing to it. And finally, we have the fourth ventricle, which is this triangular space we can see pointing towards the cerebellum. Now, if we put our brain together and go back to the bottom of the brain, we can see some other conspicuous features. Very obviously, the pons forms this large egg, and the swelling we see below the pons is the medulla oblongata right here. Working our way up, we can see two small white balls, which are the mammillary bodies, and just beside those we can see the cerebral peduncles, these two pillars, one of which has a small number 33 that you can hopefully make out on the video. Going up a little bit, we have the olfactory bulbs, these tips of these structures that should be white but have been worn thin with all your studying, and we have the olfactory tracts, these nerve lines leading back here. You can now see a stylized white H in the middle. We have the optic nerves at the front of the H, the optic chiasma in the middle of the H, and the optic tracts forming the bottom of the H on the particular orientation I'm showing you. Now there are a few more brain features that we're going to see on the 8-part brain. Because of how the 8-part brain comes apart, I can show you the insula, which is the 5th lobe of the brain, and the insula is wrapped by the lateral ventricle. Of course, there's one on each side. On the surface of the brain, wrapping around here, we can also see the cerebral cortex, shown in pink, around the white core of the brain.